afternoon, everybody. Welcome to ActiveRain University. My name is Bob Stewart. Super excited to have you here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce this guy now. He's Andrew. I'm going to call him Drew probably as we're going through here today, if that's all right. But Andrew's a real estate agent with Touchstone Realty in Martinsburg, West Virginia. There's my ugly mug as your host today. So Andrew's been a licensed realtor since 2004. He's done over $100 million in sales in the last 5 years. And 750 transactions the last 2 years. I mean, he's right top on the real trends for the nation, number 24 in the nation for individual sales agents. He was number 1 in West Virginia. He's the creator of the Drew system, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I'm going to bring Andrew on here in just a second and kind of have him say hi and introduce himself a little bit. We'll come back and talk about the Drew system at the end of the call. But he created this system. It's kind of a series of books aimed at helping you figure out how to be successful, and it's something he's done in the last 9 years to a pretty high tune. Andrew, how you doing, man? Is there anything I missed that you want to share with the folks out there today?
No, guys. I'm super excited to be here. It's one of my very, very favorite things to do is to host webinars, go to webinars, listen to new creative ideas that people have, try to add them into my business somehow. The most important thing I want to talk about, just to hit on just real quick here, is I do what you guys do. I do this every day. I wake up, I go to work, I'm a realtor. I'm not some guy who's trying to use techniques from 1996, or I'm trying to tell you how to do your job because I think I remember how it used to be. I mean, I do this every day just like you guys do. I'm in the grind. It's just me and one assistant in my office, and we got regimented processes that we can't wait to teach you guys about. So
I think that's something that bears repeating, Andrew. And I hope everybody on the call heard this, because I think a lot of times when you look at an agent who's doing, I mean, like you guys, how many deals did you do last year?
Last year we tallied in at 349, and we're at 311 this year, and we're November 5th. So we might break the old 350 mark this year.
Okay, here's what bears repeating. It's not him and a big team. Like, he doesn't have 10 people on his team. And some of the agents that we run across that are doing hundreds and hundreds of deals, they've got a team that falls under him. For Andrew, it's just him and one assistant. And I just, out of curiosity, like, does your assistant wear a cape to the office?
Well, she's good, man. She's really, really good. And as a matter of fact, you would think that I had gone through a whole bunch of assistants to find the right one. She's literally the very first person I ever hired, and it clicked and it worked, and she's a dreamer and I'm a dreamer, and we just go after it.
So what we're here today to talk about is time blocking, but really the value of time management. So let's kind of talk about the overall concept of time management and how it applies to real estate agents. So as an agent, how important is it when I wake up each day to know, like, what my day is going to entail?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people want to try to put your finger on, how are you doing it? What's the secret? There's got to be a secret here, and there is a secret, and the secret is time management. It doesn't really matter if you're doing, 1 deal a month, 2 deals a month, 30 deals a month, 2 a week. It just really doesn't matter what your volume level is. It really matters on how you manage your time. I'm a military guy. Okay, I came from the military. I was in the Navy. I was Special Forces, Search and Rescue. So everything was very regimented, and you did everything the same way at the same time every single time. And if you didn't, you failed, and that's how it was. And I was kind of brought up that way too. And so I have a schedule, which we'll get into here a little bit later. But simply put, the most important part, we all think it's a commission business. We all think that it's a listing business. You got to list the last, and all these puns we hear all the time. I mean, the reality is you got to know how to manage your time and manage your income, correctly. A lot of people do things, but they're not really accomplishing things. So I like to speak on that a good bit. But time management, it's invaluable. You got to have it.
Andrew, you're around other agents all day long. Is this a problem? Like, do you think more agents are getting out of bed and going, all right, there's two little tasks that I have here, and then I'm not really sure like what the rest of the day looks like? Or do you think more agents are getting out of bed and saying, here's the 6 things I need to get done today, here's the time I've got set aside for prospecting? Where does our industry fall in this regard?
You know, in my humble opinion, it's probably the biggest problem in our industry, because you know we're self-employed, and you know most of us are self-employed for a reason. Okay, and you know I'm self-employed because I can't really work for others, and I'm not saying that in any bad way, but certainly out of the couple hundred people who are on this call, someone can relate to that. And I always like to say, you know, if I was hiring me, would I hire me? Okay, so in other words, like if I was interviewing myself for my job, would I hire me? And you know, I think what you find with realtors is we all, you know, are kind of scatterbrained a little. We all, you know, we're all salespeople. We're all moving a million miles an hour, but not really accomplishing much. You know, we all have the same symptoms. You know, what's important is being able to kind of pull that back. Mind your own business is what I call it, you know, which is, you know, here's the things that I have to do, here are the things I have to accomplish, and getting on a schedule. I mean, I have a very regimented schedule. I still set an alarm in the mornings. I still get up at the same time, which is a very ridiculous 4:30 in the morning, but that works for me because that's my quiet time, and I have things that I can build into that time of the day. So you know, I set an alarm every night when I go to bed, and I wake up at the same time. And you know, I think it's hard for realtors to adapt to that.
Why? Is it the demands of the business pulling you in 5 million directions?
No, I think it's because no one ever tells you have to. I mean, who's going to look you in the eye and say you got to get up at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 9 in the morning? It doesn't matter. You have to go to bed before midnight. I think because there is no rule, there is no handbook, there is nothing that tells you this is exactly how you be a realtor, this is how you be a successful realtor, and this is how you be a failure as a realtor. There is no manual, and that's the genius behind our business. I mean, can you imagine if you could go to Wall Street and there were no rules? I mean, just imagine what would happen. And you know, I think for realtors that is what happens. You know, a lot of realtors don't make it in this industry because it's not that they're not self-starters. It's not that they're not motivated. It's not that they're not great people and good salesmen. They simply don't know how to run their business.
So you, because I always wonder, like, in terms of changing your behavior, right? So you had this drilled into you, I mean, literally in a physical manner, right, as coming up in the Navy. So this was something that was, like, beat into you. Do you think that somebody who's running around kind of haphazardly and always putting out that next fire, like, can somebody learn this as a part of their business?
Yes, and I want to go on the record and say this too. You can be successful and be all the things you just said, putting out fires, you know, running around with your head on fire. You never, you know, going a million miles an hour, never really accomplishing anything. The reality is you don't have to sell a ton of real estate to make a decent enough living in this industry, okay? I mean, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% commissions add up really, really quick. I want to tap the nerve of the person who wants to take it to the next level, the person who wants to go home at 5 o'clock like I do every day. I'm in the office 9 to 5 is my schedule. I don't work weekends. I don't take evening appointments. Now some of that, you know, is today's response. That's not how it always was. I wish it were. But so yeah, I think you can succeed in the real estate industry not doing it right, which is, you know, really kind of crazy to even say that. You know, you can be good at your job and do it wrong. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You can.
So without a schedule, right? Without sitting down and saying, like, lining out for yourself, like, each day, these are kind of the repetitive things that I'm going to tackle in order to build a bigger business. I mean, this is what happens to people, right? They get into the office at some point. They're running around putting out fires. And at some point they look up and they go, oh my goodness, it's noon, like I haven't really done anything productive today. How do you deal with this? How does somebody put some semblance of order around this craziness?
Yeah, you know, it's and hey, you know, I'm not perfect either. This certainly happens to me too. You know, you're like, oh my God, what just happened? It's 12 o'clock, you know. scheduling is foundational building. It's just like building a house, and I know it's a silly pun because it's what we do for a living, but I mean it's literally the foundation of everything you do in real estate. And it's not the schedule, guys. It's not the actual what is on my schedule at 10:15 to do. Everyone always kind of misses that point when I talk about this, when I'm speaking about this. It's not the schedule. It's the ability to have the schedule and stay organized because of the schedule. That's what's important. Keeping yourself moving in the right direction. Certainly, if I'm time blocking, 2 to 5 today to generate new leads, that doesn't mean at 10 o'clock if somebody calls and wants me to list their house, I tell them to call me back at 2. That's silly talk, obviously. The schedule is just the foundation of, we all do this. We're sitting back and we're looking at our computer and we're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't have much to do. What should I be doing right now? Let's look at CNN. Let's look at Facebook. That's whatever it might be. If you have a schedule that you can refer to, be it a mental schedule, which I strongly do not encourage and advise, or be it a written down schedule, then you can say, oh, okay, I'm a little ahead of schedule. Let's move on to this next task that I set out for myself. So we'll go into the scheduling here in a little while, but yeah, I think it's important.
So distractions, they're everywhere, right? They cost you money. How? Like, first off, how do distractions cost you money? And then second off, how can we deal with some of these distractions?
Distractions cost you money because we're in a service business, okay, and we all like to believe we're in a commission business. We've all read this in every book we've ever looked at, okay, but this is a service business, okay, and here's where distractions cost you money is you have to think of yourself as a business professional, such as an attorney or an accountant, let's say, somebody who would bill you hourly, and you say, here's my $300 an hour bill, okay. When we get distracted, we stop making money. And what I mean by that is when you're off course, you're off kilter, and you're not doing the things that you should be doing to generate and grow your business, you might as well be at home, and doing something else, because if you're distracted, if you're hanging out at the water cooler too long, if you're just not being productive, activity versus productivity, I believe we'll talk about here in a little while too, then ultimately you're not moving your business forward, and that's what this is all about, is moving your business from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 to step 5 in a day, and then starting back over on step 1. So yeah, distractions cost you money, because if you're distracted, you're not earning money, and if you're not earning money, obviously it's costing you money.
Give me an example of a distraction that you think a lot of agents think they need to take on that they don't actually need to take on.
Okay, that's a pretty easy one for me, even though this is debatable in today's society, is social networking. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, we know them all, okay? I'm a big Facebook guy. I'm a big Twitter guy. Bob, you saw I hit you up on Twitter last night.
Right.
So, I do it. I love it just like the next person does. Okay, but social media is addicting, and you kind of start at one place. It's like the old Wikipedia. You start reading about real estate. Next thing you know, you're reading about George Washington. You're like, how in the world did this happen? The distractions are that social media is a huge distraction. Get on, do your thing, move forward as you need to move forward. Drop a couple posts on Craigslist, hit up a couple people on Facebook, whatever you need to do. You have to do it. And I could speak days about social networking because I absolutely love it. But I think in our industry, that's what makes real estate so difficult. So here we are talking about distractions and how to get away from them. Yet the most important thing about real estate, in my opinion, today is social media, network, and marketing is a distraction. So it's like, how do you balance that? I mean, it's very ironic if you think about it.
Okay, so give us some. So we've got some ways up here that we can avoid distractions. Talk me through these a little bit.
Okay, disconnecting. What I mean about that is taking your telephone, tossing it in your top drawer for a minute, shutting your door, putting a note on it that says, whatever, I'm working, leave me alone, okay? that kind of stuff. Your cell phone, office phones, the open door policy. It's really hard to disconnect from from what you feel like is important, which is the environment in your office and people talking, and you have to be able to disconnect from that. I do it by kind of putting my phone away, shutting my door, and really saying, I'm going to grind out 20 calls, 20 minutes. I'm going to grind out 50 texts, 10 minutes, whatever. I like to play all these games and stuff, but so you have to disconnect, but you also have to set boundaries with people. People in my office, they know that they can come in, they can talk to me as long as they want, okay? But don't be afraid to look them in the eye and say, hey, Bob, it's time to go. Yeah, it's time to go.
I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. I have a hard time with that.
And it's you don't have to be rude about it, but you got to set boundaries. And if you don't set boundaries, Bob, people, they don't realize I got a guy in my office, and Lord, I hope he's not on this call, but he's a talker, and he's literally one of our top agents. I mean, this guy is ridiculously good at what he does, but the boy can talk, okay? And sometimes I just have to look at him and say, hey, man, I love to hang out with you, but, I got to get back to work here, and kind of start setting those boundaries. And now I don't have the problem anymore. He'll come in and sit down, we'll talk for 5 minutes, and then he goes, And then schedule, this is kind of crazy, but I actually try to work into my schedule, some distractions, because it is important to do the Facebook stuff like I talked about, and Twitter and those type of things. It is important to, to talk to the people in the office. You can't just be the snobby person who runs over to the, the printer, grabs something, and comes back, So, I like to make sure that, kind of in my schedule, I do mix and mingle, and I do like to talk to people, and I do like to make personal phone calls that have nothing to do with real estate. But, you have to be disciplined, and you have to remember, we always forget that this is our business, and, you have to be disciplined to remember not to waste time. And I always feel like this terrible time Nazi when I do this conversation about scheduling and foundational building, because everyone's like, my God, this guy, he must be a robot. I mean, is life even fun? I assure you, life is fun for me, okay? But you feel like, man, this guy is so regiment and boring, and I could never ever do all the things he's trying to tell me to do, okay? I promise you, once you kind of learn what works and what doesn't work and what's good and what you need more and less of, if you can hone your business in around some of these concepts, I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, I've proven it. I mean, I have 350 transactions in a year, and I'm one person.
Let me ask something. Let me ask, I've had the fortune to come across a lot of really high producers in the last 10 years. Did you know you were going to be a high producer? Like coming into it, looking back now, just 350, are you like, wow, I can't believe it? Or are you like, I'm on my way to 700?
Yeah, it's like the Wall Street Journal Real Trends number 24 in the nation. My wife congratulates me, and she says, that's excellent, Andrew. I'm so proud of you. You really made it. And I said, honey, all this means to me is 23 people beat me. And I'm kind of wired that way, Bob. I don't eat and breathe real estate by any means. It's just a job, guys. That's all this is. This is just a job, just a career that pays my bills, okay? I always thought I would be on Wall Street. I always thought I would, trade stocks and bonds. That's really what I thought I was going to do. Now, when I got into real estate and it got in my blood, yeah, I thought I could hit 100 transactions in a year. And I thought, okay, I did that. Let's go for 150, but never did I ever think, let's do 350, 450. I do have goals, and my goals are set, and I'm not too proud to say that I'm missing my goals this year. I wanted to do 420 this year, and I think I'm going to do about 400. Yeah, I know. So it's important. You gotta set your goals. But that's a solid question, Bob. I can't really say that I ever thought I would get this far, but I did always know that I wanted to move it beyond a regional awareness. Like I wanted to take something and work it on a national level.
So you mentioned this earlier, activity versus productivity. What does this mean?
Oh man, another entire webinar. Trust me. Um, Activity versus productivity. Activity is, how do you explain this? Activity is like, we feel like we're busy. Oh my goodness, I got a million things going on today. How am I going to get this all done? And the next thing you know, the end of the day is here, and you're like, oh, I didn't really accomplish too much. Why? Because you weren't productive. Okay. Um, and it all comes back to the foundation. It all comes back to the ability to schedule, and it all comes back to being able to really harness your energy inside you and say, okay, here's what I need to do to be productive. Okay, activity accomplishes nothing, guys. Okay, nothing. Activity gets you absolutely nowhere. Only thing activity does is make you look busy. There's this old story about me. I was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan. I was on a destroyer, and I used to carry this clipboard around under my arm. Did this for many years, 2 or 3 years, and it had the same blank piece of paper on it. And it was more of a test. I was just testing a theory, and I could walk around that ship, Bob, for 4 straight days, and as long as I had that clipboard in my hand, no one would ever ask me to do anything. Why? Because it was an activity. It looked like I was doing something. Okay. Now I wasn't being productive, but I was forming this activity. I tell that story just to kind of put it in context of, we're sitting down and we're doing things, and our desk is a mess, and the computer's running, the phone's ringing. We're trying to get our Bluetooth to work. We're doing all these things, and my lands, it feels like I'm tearing up the world. And at the end of the day, you didn't accomplish anything, and that's not because you're doing anything wrong. Okay, it's just because you haven't honed in on what's making you money yet. Okay, there's this old saying of, what would money tell you to do? Okay, I use it all the time. If I'm stuck on making a decision, that's what I always come back to. What's money telling me to do? Okay, I'm certainly not all about money. I'm not that guy. Okay, but that is why I come to work. Okay, so what's money telling you to do? And money is not telling you to do all these activity things. It's telling you to stick to your game plan and being productive. So that's activity versus productivity. Just because you're doing something doesn't mean you're going somewhere.
This is a rhetorical question for everybody listening, but how many of you guys have like peaks and valleys in your business? Because I know when we had our real estate brokerage, we had like 150 agents working for us. I would see this all the time where you would have people that were busy, right, because they had a couple deals going on or something, and so there was a lot of activity around those deals. And I mean, granted, these are things you have to get done as it relates to the deal, right? But then, after this flurry of activity for a week or a couple of weeks or whatever, you would see like no production from that person for many months after that, for a month or 2 or 3, where they'd have this big valley in their business. Do you think that that's why agents have these peaks and valleys in their business, is that they're very active but necessarily not productive?
Bob, peaks and valleys are a real reality in real estate. It's one of the hardest things for everybody to overcome, and it doesn't matter if you do 1 deal a year or 350 a year. Okay, we all have them. They just look a little bit different on a piece of paper. Okay, you cannot concentrate on anything harder than when you're at a peak to try to stay at that peak. Okay, it is the most important thing in your real estate career, because you're making money in your peaks. Okay, now a couple weeks ago I was speaking. I was probably in Dallas the same time you were down there, Bob, but I was talking about, it's a very long story what I was talking about, but anyways, I made this statement of, you make your money on the things you're bad at. And I kind of scanning the crowd, and people are looking at me dumbfounded, like, well, what in the world does that even mean? I don't even understand what you're saying. And I realized, man, I better go into this a little deeper. You're always going to make money at what you're good at. Okay, so let's just say, for example, you're really good at cold calling. Well, if you're really good at cold calling, you're always going to make money on cold calling. Why? Because you're comfortable with it, and you like to come in the office, and when you need a go-to, you're like, ha, I'm going to cold call, Where you lose money is by not doing the things that you hate to do, okay, which I'll use cold calling as an example for me. I absolutely hate cold calling, okay? But I recognize that if I cold call And if I make $1 cold calling, that's $1 I would have never made in my entire life because I hate it that much. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you make your money doing the things that you hate. You don't make your money doing the things that you love because you're always going to do those, and you're always going to make money doing those, and it doesn't matter what you do. If you love it, you're going to make money doing it. Try to hone in on the stuff that you hate, and if you can really try to make money or learn how to make money or delegate to somebody something you hate so much and they make you money, then that's how you stay out of your valleys.
So that leads, somebody asked the question in here, do you use a virtual assistant?
No. I used to. I'm very familiar with the process. I don't like virtual assistants. I'm a very much I need to touch it and feel it guy. I'm not a control guy at all. When my jobs and duties are very strict, and I know exactly what I have to do, and my assistant knows exactly what she has to do, and it's a machine. And if one part gets in the way of the other, the machine gets broken. Okay, so what I learned with a virtual assistant is I couldn't really. I'm not saying I couldn't count on them because that's not really fair. I don't want to bundle everybody together, but I have a certain process that I want everything done in a certain order I wanted it done, and I just couldn't. If I couldn't touch it, then I couldn't make it work right for me.
I'm taking this call off the rails, so I don't have slides for these questions. These are just things that are popping in my head as you're talking. Talk to me for a second about leverage, because there becomes some point in your business where you can't do more than what you can do, and so you end up having to turn and leverage resources around you. You have an assistant that you've talked about. Obviously, she wears a cape. I mean, there's no getting around that. But in what other places in your business have you used leverage as a way to find other resources to maybe do things you don't like to do some of the activity things in your business? I mean, it's not entirely on your assistant. Are there other places where you've used leverage?
Yeah, I very much so. I certainly am a firm believer in the fact of why do now what someone else can do for you. Okay, and I use that all the time. Like for instance, I have a guy who works in all the courthouses locally. He's an abstractor for a local attorney, and for an Applebee's card every once in a while or whatever, he'll help me out in the courthouse. Now, certainly, if I needed to go to the courthouse, how much time does it take me to go to the courthouse? Or I can pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, Nick, can you grab this for me, 1, 2, 3? And that guy probably puts in, he probably saves me, 20 hours a week. I mean, because, it takes a lot of research to do what we do for a living. So I absolutely leverage people. Lenders, I have a lot of lenders who, when you hit certain production levels in your career, people want to work with you, and right. they start bending over backwards for the opportunity to work with you. Like, so for instance, on Wednesday we're having a telethon at my office. Okay, me and there's only 7 people in my office, and just to kind of put it in perspective, there's 7 people in our office. It was about 1,600 transactions in our entire county last year, and a little over 800 of them were ours. So 50% share, we'll call it. Okay. So we're having a telemarketing thing next week. Well, I invited 2 of my lenders who are dying to work with me, and hey, I want to work with them. Everybody, I want to work with everybody. And said, hey, why don't you come over and telemarket for me? So now I have 2 of them coming, plus me, plus my assistant. So I'll be able to hit 4 times the people, and I'm not paying anybody anything to do it. So they're just calling, trying to qualify people, qualify. And they're happy to have the opportunity. So yeah, I absolutely am a genius on leveraging other people's work to boost my career, I guess.
All right, so we could just, again, I took that off the rails a little bit. I apologize. So just to recap, the values of time management, and have a basic idea of your daily schedule, organization, or based on production leads to money in the bank. If you don't schedule time to do it, it won't get done. Distractions cost time, so avoid them. So let's talk about making your schedule work for you. And Brad had just asked, will a couple of typical days be shown? I don't know that we'll necessarily show you a typical day, but he's going to walk us through the way that you kind of manage your day, which is based on this rule of thirds. And rule of thirds is actually a photography term, right, where you put your subject into like different thirds of a screen. But talk to us about your rule of thirds as it relates to scheduling your real estate business.
Okay. before I get into it in any grave detail, I want to say this. Some people it's thirds, some people it's fourths, some people it's 2-hour window blocks. My way is my way, but that doesn't make it the right way. Okay. Certain points of your career, you have to do certain things that you won't have to do later on in your career, so that your schedule is a moving target. Okay, for me, my first third of my day, which is about 8 to 11-ish, is I always go back and recap yesterday. I think about yesterday. I think about the things that didn't get accomplished yesterday that needed to get accomplished, and I try to identify any potential problems inside of that. And the higher your transactions get, the more problems you have. That's obviously very likely. Okay, so like I said, every day 5 o'clock, excuse me, every day 5 o'clock I go home. Within about a 10-minute window there. I finish up what I'm doing and I go home, and I'll make a couple quick notes on a little sticky, stick it on my computer screen. Hey, don't forget to do this, 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 this. Stick it on my screen and go home. Come in the next day. That's what I'm working on. What I want you to really think about is the second item you see here. I'm digging into my contracts and identifying potential problems. This is where the rubber meets the road for me. This is it. I take contract after contract after contract after contract and look for the issues that are in that contract. What is potentially going to reach out and grab me now, later, or an hour before closing? Is it USDA? Are the windows good? Is it oil? Do I have oil in the tank? All the things that you guys, everything that you can think of that goes wrong with a contract, I mentally go through that in my head. And we make notes, and I say to my assistant Diva, here are 3 or 4 things we need to keep an eye on, and then she'll input it into our process and make sure everything runs smoothly. I pride myself on these 2.5, 3 hours, because this is the time slot that makes you money. You're going to get me all wound up here, Bob. This is where when someone is at a barbecue and they look at their friend and say, yeah, I see you sold your house. Yeah, Andrew did it, and he was blank, fill in the blank. And he was great or he was terrible. Okay, buyers and sellers have no idea what we do for a living. They think that we put a sign in the front yard, give out the combination to the box, somebody goes, and then voila, we just made $8,000. They have absolutely zero idea of what goes into closing a real estate transaction. So the only thing they ever remember is the end result. Was it miserable or was it easy? That's all they remember. Okay, right here, identifying potential problems is where you will make so much money, because people will tell their friends, oh my God, what do you mean you had a hard time? I mean, my God, I used this guy and he never even called me. And hey, we're going to closing, So that's my first third. And as much as the second third and the third third are important, and and hitting your circle and doing your farms and all that stuff's important. And I don't want people to think that I downplay that, okay? But man, identifying your problems that are coming, that are approaching, and that could possibly happen is the most important thing of my entire day.
Those things become the activities that a lot of agents are running around with their hair on fire over, right?
Yeah, and there's zero reason. Here's the other thing, guys. The other realtor, you have to remember that the other realtor you're working with is not as good as you. Just remember that statement. And I call realtors all the time, and I'm the most friendly person in the entire world. I challenge you to find a realtor in my market that doesn't like to work with me. And I'll say, hey, we really need to keep an eye on these 2 or 3 things. Oh, Andrew, you're right. I didn't even think about that. And why am I doing that? Am I doing that because I think I'm better than them? Absolutely not. I'm doing that because this is what we do. I want to get paid. So. I'm like everybody else, but out of 350 transactions, I lost 9 last year. I mean, 9 deals is a lot of deals. Don't get me wrong, but I mean that's not many. It's less than 3%. So, yes, very important. Identify your problems. The second third of my day is really research time, and I feel like people don't do this enough. Like And when I say research, I don't mean like going to CNN.com and seeing what's going on a global, global scale.
Andrew, just to interject, I would actually suggest that most people do not do this. Right, like
Yes.
the vast majority of agents are not doing this or finding time to do this in their daily business.
Yeah, and this is more important in my opinion than scheduling appointments. Okay, and here's why: is when I say your industry, I mean like your market where you're at, what's going on. That could be Chamber of Commerce, that could be the Rotary, that could be researching tax records, tax deeds, go into the courthouse for sales, attending auctions, or whatever that might be. Okay, now for me, a lot of my industry research is one of the first things I do when I list a property is I identify everybody around that property. Okay, so if I have a listing appointment tomorrow, this is where in the second third of my day, I'm doing research about this listing tomorrow. Because when I go out, a lot of what we sell here locally is, houses on a couple acres, okay? Which that won't speak true to everybody on the call, but that's kind of the West Virginia way, as I call it. So when I go out, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to say, Bob the seller, yeah, Nancy, I know Nancy next door. Yep, she 3.2 acres. Yeah, really nice house over there. I think you're kind of comparable. But what about Farmer Bob back here? What do you know about him? I know that's a 64-acre parcel. But so really being fluent with my product. So right here in this second third it's important to remember that. You gotta know your market. And we all think we know our market. Even I think I know my market, but I don't. There's more to know. Okay, and especially with the way that deeds are transferring anymore. You got deed releases going from seller to Bank of America to Fannie. You're trying to track down Rios. That's a whole nother conversation, of course, too. But nobody does enough research here. And part of that research, guys, means realtors too. Realtors are our best friends, and I love to use that. And if there's an open house, I always try to go. Realtors, we meet each other. Yes, we're competitive and we're competitors, and I want to beat you and you want to beat me. I get that. Trust me. I'm the most competitive person you ever meet in your entire life. Okay, but I don't lose sight of the fact that it's important. It's important that to stick to the realtors that are in your industry locally. I meet with 5 realtors once a week, 1 hour. Sometimes it's only 45 minutes. We all meet at a local coffee shop. We all talk about what we got going on. I'll have a handshake agreement. We're not going to, backstab each other. I got this going on. I got that going on. Here's what I got going on. Great, good. Thanks for coffee. Let's move on. Those are 5 friends of mine now. Do I go out with them and have a drink in the evenings? No. I mean, maybe I don't even like a couple of them, But, I mean, the reality is we're all in the same industry. We're all speaking the same language. We gotta know what's going on, and I spend a lot of time in my second third with that kind of stuff.
So there's a lot of people on here. There's a fair number that said, hey, I've been in the business 20 years, 15 years, 18 years. I would expect that those people have an idea of what types of things to research, because you mentioned a bunch, tax deeds and all these different things, right? Zoning issues or whatever it is. For somebody that's maybe newer to the industry or has never really thought about getting in and researching what's going on in their local market, like how do you learn where to even look or what things you should be researching? Is this something where early on in your career you look toward a mentor for this stuff? Is this just things that over the years have come up in your contracts and you said, hey, man, I got to figure this out? Or how do you know where to look?
As far as solving problems, that's more of an experience thing. You can't learn that in a book, okay? But as far as research, yeah, I mean, even early on in my career, I mean, my first job was Century 21 in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I was hired. I knew nobody, okay? There's a big, long story. I won't tell the story right now. Long story short, I knew nobody. I had no idea what to do. And I say to my broker on day one, what do I do? And he hands me the phone book. Start calling people. Like, I thought he was kidding, and he clearly he wasn't kidding. So that's how I got started. And early on, I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. As some tips to the people who are just kind of getting started out or looking for some new ideas, go to places where buyers are. Okay, and here are some examples. Like West Virginia is a non-judicial state, so we have auctions on the courthouse steps when people don't pay their mortgage. Okay, so who's standing there? Buyers. Okay, if your state's a non-judicial state, you should be standing there. Okay, as a matter of fact, one of my clients that I sold 111 houses for last year, it's one client, 111 houses I met on my courthouse steps. Okay, so there, auctions, tax sales. If your state is a lien theory state, they're selling off tax sales. You certainly don't have to go there and buy anything, but people who are standing there are the people who are making money. Secretary of State, researching LLCs, dropping letters to people, going back in the MLS and looking at buyers' names, contact them. If it says Palmer Premier Properties LLC, you probably want to know who in the world Palmer Premier Properties are. So get on the Secretary of State, do some research, find their LLC, get their contact information, drop them a letter. These are the things that make you money. Well, these are the things that grow your business.
And that all comes in your second third of the day when you're researching what's going on. It's not just in the industry, right? I mean, you're researching what's going on in your market, who the players are, how you can get a hold of these people, who's the guy that might have 50 properties to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if you're not doing that, I mean, where are you making your money? Where are you getting your listings and your buyers?
So this is how I envision you, like, coming into the office for your final third of the day when you're, like, going to schedule some appointments, you're getting ready to go out and meet some clients. Obviously, you keep your mask, like, in the drawer, and you pull it out and you're ready to go. But talk about your final third of the day.
Yeah, I do have two full arm sleeve tattoos. Yeah, it looks just like me, Bob. Nice. The final third is actually, this slide doesn't depict really well exactly what it is. It's two things. It's reserved for appointments, and it's oh yeah, you did, okay, and not having appointments. It's for scheduling some. So I try to, first off, let me say this: listing appointments I always schedule at my office. Okay, which is another life-shattering change for most realtors. Okay, most realtors think, okay, I got a listing appointment, I got to go out, I got to drive over to 123 High Street, I got to walk through the house, I got to look at it, blah, 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 okay? I tell people, if you want to list your house with me, that step one is coming into my office so we can sit down and look on I use a big screen TV that I use through my Apple TV, so we can look at comps on your house, okay? That weeds out the suckers really early. And when you comps don't lie, guys. Okay, comps are comps. So when they come in, and look at the screen, and they're like, "Oh, okay, you think our house is worth 175? We really need 290." Okay, that's fine. We can talk the short sale process or whatever we need to do. But what we just accomplished there is we didn't drive 30 minutes, sit there, talk about children and kids and football, and leave and waste 2 hours of our day. Okay, so I always like to make them come to me, which is kind of a side note. But during this 2-3 hour period, which is about 2 to 5:30, 5:10, somewhere around there, that's really hardcore, hitting my circle of influence, forwarding people, which is what I call friends, occupation, recreation, and dreams, reaching out to my network. If there's anything really cool that had happened in the journal that day, maybe calling somebody and saying, "Hey, congratulations, I just saw your daughter in the journal," blah, 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 that kind of stuff. Real hardcore networking for this first third. We get suckered into thinking we have to use our telephone so much, okay? Probably out of 100 phone calls a day, I answer 2, 3, maybe. And why is that? It's because we're all talkers. I mean, I'm a talker. I've been talking to you for an hour, and I could keep on talking. So I recognize that about myself. So I just try not to answer my telephone. I'll text you back immediately. Say, "Hey, I'm in a meeting, can't talk right now." Send me a text. Text messages, emails. High touch stuff. That's a lot of my final third of my day. The final third of my day is where I bring my first 2/3 together. So I got my first third of my day is really just kind of, contracts and the mundane, boring stuff that we have to do and we have to commit to. And we got to look for issues, and we got to make sure everything's good, and we got to, tidy up the mistakes from yesterday. The second third is really trying to get better at what I do for a living, trying to be better, trying to understand my market better, trying to know more people, trying to really, make myself better, to stand myself apart from the next person, the next realtor, my next competitor I'm going to be up against. And then the third is where I try to bring it all together, is schedule the appointments. Really, I call people that I know, not cold calling, and say, hey, I just wanted to reach out to you for X or whatever. I give away, tickets and stuff during this time of the day. Once again, I mean, the whole networking thing is a whole nother, ActiveRain, webinar. But so yeah, that's one of my biggest tricks that I like to tell people in the second third is make as many people as humanly possible come to your office.
Do you think, I mean, agents aren't doing that, right? We're definitely meeting people at their houses. How did you make that transition? Did you start off right away? You're like, I'm Andrew Johnson. I've never listed a house before. You're my first listing appointment. You'd have to come to my office? Or is this something you kind of realized over time?
No, I never try to I never try to have an arrogance about myself. I really just try to stick to the facts. My dad used to always say that to me. Just just stick to the facts. Just stick to the facts. Just stick to the facts. And the facts are, I cannot afford to get in my car and waste 2.5, 3 hours with you today, and it has nothing to do with you. Okay, this isn't about you. This is about me. It's the one time in my life I can say it's all about me, and the reason being is because we only have so many hours in a day. This is why realtors work until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, is because it's time management, Bob. If somebody does not want to come to your office for any reason, and I don't care what the reason is, you don't need to work with them, because if they're not willing to work at least with that little restraint, how in the world is it going to go when they say, you're going to do an open house in my house on Saturday? And you're like, no, I can't. And okay, well, you know where that's going to go. A lot of the, hey, I need you to come to my office, a lot of that is feeling out the client. I get a lot of great answers off of that sometimes, like, oh, well, my husband and I are getting divorced, and it's really not. Well, what, you wanted me to come to your house so you all could like put me in the middle and stab me with forks, So yeah, so I mean, agents aren't doing that. And if you take anything from this, and everything else, you're like, I hate that guy, he was terrible. Take that, okay? Just try that for the next 2 weeks, and I mean, I'm telling you, it will change your career.
All right, let's talk about turning off versus turning down, because I've seen some people leaving comments like, yeah, it'd be really nice to be able to not work on the weekends, like fat chance, or I always feel like at 9 o'clock I've got stuff that still has to be done. Talk for a little bit about turning off versus turning down.
Well, you can't turn off, okay?
Right.
And I'm certainly not saying that 5 o'clock I throw my phone in my glove box and I go home and I hug my kids and I tell them how much I love them and I don't ever think about nothing until 9 in the morning. Yeah, that's certainly not the case. But you can use a mute button, and you can kind of turn the volume down a little bit. And I take an hour out of my night every night. There is no set hour, but my wife knows I have about an hour, okay, that I use to kind of set aside to check my phone and see if any text messages came in, and just kind of get ready for tomorrow and mentally prepare what's going on tomorrow. Okay, now that's turning down. I'm not calling people, I'm not working, I'm just mentally preparing. Okay, and that's important, because if you don't do that, you're going to get to work in the morning and be like, oh man, what am I supposed to do? I might put some notes in my phone that says, hey, don't forget to do this, or send myself a text. We all do that. Don't forget to call Bob or whatever. I love that your name's Bob. It works perfect in all my analogies. So turning it down is important. Don't turn it off. I would love to say to everybody, yeah, I turn it off. It's not the case. You don't ever turn off real estate. Real estate doesn't go away. You're going to eat it. You're going to breathe it every single day of your life. But, it is important to go home, decompress, kick your feet up, I got two little young girls, a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old today. Happy birthday to her. So I do like to go home and kick my feet up and read a book and watch a TV show. But the reality is, real estate doesn't go away. There is no snooze button. So just turn it down a little bit when you go home and try to stay as sane as you possibly can.
So you have this concept called keeping up and catching up, and you use it as a way to stay in touch with your sphere. Tell me a little bit about that. What does that entail?
Well, I keep my circle of influence and kind of two bubbles. Okay, the keeping up bubble and the catching up bubble. Okay. The keeping up bubble is the people that these are like investors. Okay, these are banks, investors, trust funds, hedge funds, whatever it might be. The people who are consistently moving and dodging and weaving that you have to try to keep up with. And if I have a customer or a client that I've been chasing, I need to kind of keep up with what's going on with them. Okay, the catching up people are, your regular old home buyers, your regular old, listing appointments. These are the people who are going to buy or sell a house every once in a while, every 3-5 years on average, as people do across America. You just need to catch up with these people, and that's a quick text message or a quick email. How you doing? That kind of stuff. So I like to really break my business into two bubbles, the keeping up and the catching up business. Another entire conversation, but the keeping up with the people is where my second third comes in. The catching up people, those are the people who are the low-hanging fruit, the easy people that you just we all have those people in our life that we know when they sell a house, they're calling us. Okay. We all have them. Now the key is it 2 people, is it 3 people, or is there 100 people? For me, it's probably 100 people that I know are going to use my services and are going to tell people about me as often as I possibly can. But you got to catch up to these people. You got to always make sure you touch them because people forget.
So there it is, a little recap on that. Find a balance, allot an hour or so in the evening to tie up some loose ends, and decompression is key, right? Don't be at work 24/7, keeping up and catching up with your sphere. Talk to me for a second about the Drew, the ultimate, the Drew guide.
Yeah, the Drew system.
Drew system.
It came. What happened was, a lot of people were coming to me for training, advice, help, coaching, and I never felt right coaching people because I don't feel any different than the next person on this phone in this conversation. So I started just kind of jotting down ideas in a catalog. It was a better way of explaining how the Drew system started. So that's about 3 years ago. And eventually we just made it an entire, I think it's about, well, it's 10 ebooks, and each ebook's about 200 pages long, so 2,000 pages of just stuff. So it was clearly never going to be a book, or it would have looked like a Bible. So we really just started honing down on it, and we made an ebook which is actually getting ready to launch November 12th. It's called Delivering Real Estate Wealth. You can find it on Amazon or whatever. And it's a comprehensive plan from day one all the way up to retirement. That's the best ways I can put it. The first couple things we talk about is identifying what kind of agent you are, and the second thing we talk about is scheduling and foundational building. And we give you a full broken out schedule, and we give you ideas for your schedule. It's 200 pages, so it's very detailed, I guess. So that's what it is. I'm so excited about it, and it's not a financial thing for me. Trust me, I love this part of it, and nothing made me madder than that first day when Ron handed me a phone book and said, "Here's how you learn how to do real estate." And you talk about frustrating, So anyway, so that's launching the 12th of November on Amazon, iBook, Barnes and Noble, Apple Store, iTunes, wherever you want to get it.
What's supportdrew.com? So I did this. I went in there. I clicked a little button. It allowed me to log in with my Twitter, and so at some point, like the day it launches, right? I'm gonna send a tweet out that says, "Hey, Drew has a great book. Check it out."
Correct. Amazon and Apple have this new thing now. It's a security system. Essentially, it's the best way as I can describe it. That it keeps people from publishing books that aren't really professionals in their industry. Okay. And you have to make this big application, blah blah blah. And after you make this application, they give you a standard. My standard was 250 supporters. Okay, so I have to get 250 people who, you don't have to know me, but you know that I'm a real live human being. I'm not the Prince of Abib trying to give you $1 million or something. So, so that's what it is. It's supportdrew.com, and if I could get on my hands and knees and beg everybody for the last hour I gave you, if you literally just go to this, supportdrew.com, it takes, what's it take, Bob, 10 seconds at the most?
If that.
It's so vitally important to me, guys, because if I don't get there by the 12th, then, I got to start all back over, and I can't launch until December 12th, and, I'm still, I think, about 50 people away, so I'm really asking everybody if you can find it in your heart, take the 12 seconds, go to supportdrew.com, click on Facebook or Twitter, hit OK a couple of times, bing bang boom, you're done. It's not a call of action, it's not a purchase thing, it has absolutely nothing to do with the Drew system. Okay, and if you want to look at buydrew.com, buydrew.com. That's where you would actually buy the program on the 12th, buydrew.com. So
all right. So here's the deal. We're gonna. Do you have a few minutes? I mean, we got 3 minutes before we're officially at the end, and I'll let everybody go if they want. But okay, cool. So let's answer some of the questions that have come in from some of the folks listening. There's been some pretty good questions in here. One had to do with, so I had one lady who was like, oh, in all caps, like, oh my goodness, this is the idea of having people come into the office. That was a huge aha for her. And then on the flip side, I had someone else who was saying, at what point do you actually go and see the houses? And does your listing appointment become like a two-step process where you get them in there and get them signed up? But at some point, you actually have to go out and look at the house. Is that right? Talk me through that.
I do, and I do that on Thursday morning between 10 and 12. My wife and I do it, as a matter of fact, and that's if it works into the schedule of the client, in all fairness to the person who's going to say, he's crazy. Yeah, the Thursday 10 to 12 is kind of when I'll make my rounds, look at my new listings, my existing listings. If the people can't be home, that's perfectly fine. As little interaction as humanly possible is best. Okay. Yes, it's a customer service business, so don't take it the wrong way, and don't light your hair on fire. It is very important to have good customer service, but as little as I have to see you, the better, because the more you talk to me and the more you take my time, and it's not a mean thing. I want to talk to you, and I love you, and I love people, trust me. But if I don't have to see your house with you there, then you're not imposing your opinions on me on value. You're not telling me all the wonderful things about the house. I want to look at it through a buyer's eyes so I can tell you, I love your house, here's what the value is, and here's 2 or 3 things I really think you should consider between now and then. So yes, it does kind of become a 2-step process. It's actually a 3-step process, because then my photographer goes out and takes photos for me.
Leverage. That sounded like leverage to me.
Leverage, my friend.
What's your pre-work routine? So you said you get up at 4:30 and you're in the office by 9. That's a lot of time. I mean, for some people, that's their whole work day, right? 5.5 hours or 4.5 hours or whatever. Like, what are you doing in that pre-get to the office routine?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I've worked more before you got here than you'll work today. It's my most productive time of my day, because nobody's calling, nobody's emailing. There are 0 distractions, trust me, in my house. So, that's really feet up on the front porch, reading the newspaper. I do a lot of social media stuff during that time, kind of the Facebook, Twitter stuff. That's me time. It's still very business oriented, trust me. But it's a lot of me time. It's a lot of working on the Drew program. It's a lot of the supportdrew.com stuff. It's a lot of Facebook and Twitter and preparing for these type of things. It's kind of my time to be off of real estate while being very entrenched in real estate, if that makes any sense. But I have 5 or 6 people I know I can call at 5 in the morning. You guys all know them. My grandfather's one of them, who's a developer locally. So we can bounce ideas off each other. So I stay very busy. I go to bed pretty early. I'm a 10 o'clock guy. That's about the best you get out of me. So that's just my schedule. It doesn't work for everybody.
So there's a couple of questions here about lead generation, because with a business like yours, it would seem that you're doing some amount of lead generation. So you talked about, like, in your third of the day, calling, keeping up, catching up. You talked about the research that you do that probably leads you to clients and prospecting activities, like the example you gave with finding an LLC and tracking that person down. Like, where is your lead generation in this scenario, though? Is it kind of intertwined throughout the day?
That is my lead generation. I still use Market Leader, and I still, I get Trulia leads and Zillow leads, and, those leads are as good as they are, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, the best lead that you can ever find is an organic lead, and that's how you find, like, the LLC research and that kind of stuff. I mean, those are the leads that are going to pay you 80% of the time, and the other leads are going to pay you 6 to 7% of the time. So I get a ton of referrals, as you can imagine. I mean, as you go out through the year and you try to do things right and you try to make your business good, people obviously you would like to believe likes to refer you to others, so get a lot of referral business, which of course is the best business out there because they just think you can walk on water. But as far as just straight up lead generation, I do a lot of farming. I do a pumpkin patch, which you and I were talking about.
Right.
I do a lot of stuff during Christmas. I do Christmas tree pickups. I do I do a lot of the organic stuff, the slow growth stuff. So I do website stuff. I do get leads off Market Leader, that kind of stuff. But I do not count on that by any means.
What percentage of your leads generation come from people you know versus people you don't know? Like, did you just say that 80% of your business is coming from people that you know or that are referring you to people they know?
Yeah, I'm for sure 70-30. I'm probably 80-20. It's actually one of my goals this year. One of my goals this year was to get 100% off of any lead generation, network. Not that I would quit using them, but just for me not to have to count on it at all. I'm probably not going to get there, but I'm feeling like I'm getting 75%, 80% of my leads and good solid calls are referrals or that kind of stuff. And of course, 350 transactions a year, I have a lot of signs in front yards too. So a lot of my business, that's probably of the 80%, probably half of it comes from there. So, referrals and sign calls, 75-80% all day long.
Awesome. All right, we're a couple minutes past. Andrew, I really appreciate you joining me, man. Thank you so much.
You bet. And I want to tell everybody if you have any questions, you can hit me up directly. You can write down my email address. I'll give it out to you openly. I don't mind one bit. It's P3B, like Papa 3 Bravo, 69arj@gmail.com. I know it's a little complicated, but welcome to dealing with Fannie Mae. P3B69arj@gmail.com. Use it. Send me emails. I don't mind. I will absolutely respond to you. So thanks everyone for coming, and it's been all my pleasure, pal.
Thanks, guys. Hey, you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. Look forward to seeing you again real soon at ActiveRain University. And just on behalf of Carrie and Michelle, who are always behind the scenes, thank you, Andrew. We really appreciate you joining us today. Bye-bye, everybody.